The rain had ended only moments before dawn, leaving the ancient stone walls of Ashcombe Hall glistening beneath a pale English sky. Servants hurried across polished corridors, carrying silver trays, fresh flowers, and lengths of expensive silk as preparations began for the grand spring ball that would gather some of the finest families of England beneath one roof. Every chandelier was inspected, every curtain brushed, every portrait polished, until it reflected the morning light. Nothing less than perfection would satisfy Duchess Lavinia Ashcombe. Standing before a towering mirror framed in gilded oak, the Duchess admired the elegance that time had not yet stolen from her. At 50 years of age, she still possessed striking beauty, immaculate posture, and an expression that made even seasoned servants lower their eyes. To Lavinia, noble blood demanded flawless appearances, and appearances alone determined respect. She believed kindness was useful only when it enhanced one's reputation, while compassion without beauty was merely wasted effort. Yet despite the grandeur surrounding her, one thought darkened her mood. Her daughter, Lady Beatrice Ashcombe, was 24 years old, gentle in speech and generous by nature, but far heavier than society considered acceptable for an unmarried noblewoman. Lavinia regarded her daughter's figure as a personal disgrace, an imperfection that no expensive gown or fashionable hairstyle could conceal. Every invitation, every ball, every gathering forced the Duchess to calculate how little of Beatrice should be seen. She will remain upstairs until most of the guests have arrived, Lavinia instructed the head housekeeper without looking away from the mirror. If anyone asks after Lady Beatrice, you may say she is feeling unwell. The housekeeper bowed quietly. She had heard the same command many times before. Several floors above, Beatrice sat beside an open window overlooking the estate gardens. Morning sunlight filtered through climbing roses, bathing her room in warm gold. Instead of jewels scattered across her dressing table, there were sketchbooks filled with drawings of wildflowers, stacks of well-read novels, and sheets of music covered with careful handwriting. A young maid entered carrying several elegant gowns. Her Grace wishes you to choose one for tonight, my lady. Beatrice smiled softly. Thank you, Clara. Which one do you think the roses would like best? The maid laughed despite herself. I do not believe roses judge anyone, my lady. Perhaps that is why I enjoy them. After Clara left, Beatrice's smile faded only slightly. She had long since learned that her mother's instructions were not suggestions, but quiet sentences. She would attend the ball only briefly, speak to almost no one, and disappear before becoming the subject of whispered conversations. It had been that way for years. She remembered overhearing ladies remark that she would have been lovely if only she were slimmer. She remembered gowns altered again and again, never because they pleased her, but because her mother insisted they disguise her shape. She remembered dinners where every extra spoonful invited another sharp glance from across the table. None of those memories had hardened her heart. If anything, they had softened it. Later that afternoon, while servants busied themselves decorating the ballroom, Beatrice slipped through the smaller gardens toward the nearby village. The villagers greeted her with genuine warmth that required neither titles nor ceremony. An elderly widow proudly showed the blanket Beatrice had quietly paid to have repaired before winter. A little boy ran toward her carrying a wooden horse she had carved for him after his father's death. The village schoolmistress thanked her for donating books that many children could never have afforded. Beatrice accepted every grateful smile with quiet embarrassment, insisting she had done nothing extraordinary. You always say that, the schoolmistress replied. But extraordinary people usually do. As the afternoon faded into evening, elegant carriages began rolling through the towering gates of Ashcombe Hall. Horses stamped upon the gravel, while liveried footmen opened polished doors for dukes, earls, barons, and their elaborately dressed families. Diamonds shimmered beneath candlelight. Silk gowns rustled through magnificent corridors as musicians tuned violins inside the ballroom. Among the arriving guests was Lord Nathaniel Hawthorne. At 33, he was already considered the wealthiest bachelor in England. His vast estates, thriving shipping ventures, and textile mills had made his fortune legendary. Yet his reputation rested as much upon his quiet intelligence as upon his immense wealth. Unlike many gentlemen of his rank, Nathaniel disliked empty flattery and endless displays of vanity. Every ambitious mother dreamed of claiming him as a son-in-law, while every celebrated beauty hoped to catch his attention before the evening ended. Duchess Lavinia welcomed him with practiced grace, already imagining how valuable such an acquaintance might become. As conversation filled the great hall, she glanced once toward the grand staircase. "Make certain Lady Beatrice waits," she whispered to a servant. Nathaniel noticed neither the whisper nor the servant's anxious nod. His eyes wandered instead across the magnificent hall, searching not for beauty, but for something that felt genuine amid all the glittering perfection. Unbeknownst to everyone present, that search was about to lead him toward the one woman the Duchess had spent years trying to keep invisible. The ballroom glowed beneath hundreds of candles, their golden light reflecting from crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors until the entire hall seemed wrapped in a warm, shimmering haze. Gentle music drifted through the room as noble families exchanged graceful bows and carefully measured compliments. Everywhere Lord Nathaniel Hawthorne turned, another ambitious mother introduced a beautiful daughter, each hoping to become the woman who captured England's most eligible bachelor. Nathaniel answered every greeting with perfect courtesy, yet none of the conversations held his attention for long. Too many smiles appeared rehearsed, too many compliments sounded practiced, and too many eyes measured only the value of his fortune rather than the character of the man who possessed it. Seeking a moment of quiet, he excused himself and wandered away from the crowded ballroom. The farther he walked through Ashcombe Hall, the fainter the music became. At last he reached a glass conservatory, where moonlight spilled through towering windows onto marble floors, surrounded by blooming orange trees and fragrant white lilies. Then he heard music. Someone was playing the pianoforte with extraordinary tenderness. There was no audience, no applause waiting at the end, only melody filled with longing and quiet hope. Nathaniel remained still, unwilling to interrupt. When the final notes faded into silence, the young woman seated before the instrument slowly turned. It was Lady Beatrice. She immediately stood, clearly startled to discover someone listening. "I beg your pardon, my lord," she said softly. "I believed everyone was enjoying the ball." Nathaniel smiled gently. "I believe I was enjoying this far more." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "You are generous." "No," he replied, merely truthful. For several moments, neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward, something Nathaniel had rarely experienced during fashionable gatherings. Instead of admiring the jewels around her neck or commenting upon the elegance of the evening, he noticed the music resting open before her. "Did you compose that piece?" She hesitated before nodding. "It helps me think. I hope you never stop writing." Those simple words surprised her more than elaborate praise ever could. Few people had shown interest in anything she created. Most noticed only what they believed she lacked. Their conversation wandered naturally from music to literature, from painting to the countryside surrounding Ashcombe Hall. Beatrice spoke warmly of the estate's forests, the changing seasons, and the happiness she found among ordinary villagers. Nathaniel listened with genuine fascination. Unlike many ladies of society, she never attempted to impress him. She simply spoke honestly. When distant laughter echoed through the corridor, Beatrice stepped back. "I should return before my absence is noticed." Nathaniel inclined his head. "I hope this is not our last conversation." Neither realized Duchess Lavinia had already discovered her daughter missing. The Duchess entered the conservatory only moments after Beatrice departed. Seeing Nathaniel standing alone, she smiled graciously, though her eyes quickly searched the room. "My lord, everyone is wondering where you've disappeared." "I found a pleasant conversation," Nathaniel answered. Lavinia forced a polite smile. "I trust one of our distinguished guests kept you entertained." "A remarkable lady did." For a heartbeat, uncertainty crossed the Duchess's face. Before she could ask another question, Nathaniel returned to the ballroom. The remainder of the evening passed, but his thoughts repeatedly returned to the quiet woman whose kindness had needed no performance. While other ladies competed for admiration, Beatrice had sought only solitude and music. The following week, Nathaniel found an entirely respectable reason to visit Ashcombe Hall. He wished to discuss improvements to neighboring farmland jointly managed by his estates and those of the Duke of Ashcombe. Duke Edmund welcomed the proposal enthusiastically and invited him to luncheon. When Nathaniel casually asked whether Lady Beatrice might join them, Duchess Lavinia answered before anyone else could speak. "My daughter has been suffering dreadful headaches. She requires complete rest." Nathaniel accepted the explanation politely, yet something about the Duchess's haste troubled him. Several days later he returned again, this time bringing maps concerning drainage projects that could benefit both estates. Once more Beatrice was absent, still unwell. Nathaniel inquired. Unfortunately, Lavinia replied without hesitation. The explanation sounded rehearsed. As he prepared to leave that afternoon, Nathaniel crossed the rear gardens on his way to his carriage. There, beyond rows of flowering hedges, he unexpectedly saw Beatrice kneeling beside a gardener's young daughter, carefully bandaging the child's scraped knee after a fall. She spoke with such patience that the little girl's tears disappeared before the bandage was tied. Nathaniel remained unnoticed. He watched Beatrice help an elderly gardener gather fallen tools before thanking him, as though he had done her a favor instead. Every servant greeted her with genuine affection rather than fearful obedience. Their smiles were effortless. He finally understood something that had puzzled him since the ball. Inside the great house, the Duchess ruled through pride. Outside its walls, her daughter inspired loyalty through kindness. As Beatrice disappeared among the gardens, carrying a basket of flowers toward the village path, Nathaniel realized he no longer wished merely to meet her again. He wished to understand why a woman admired by everyone who truly knew her was treated as though she scarcely belonged in her own home. And he quietly resolved that the next time he came to Ashcombe Hall, he would not allow anyone to hide Lady Beatrice from him. Nathaniel kept his promise to himself. During the weeks that followed, he visited Ashcombe Hall often, always under respectable pretenses that no one could question. Sometimes he arrived to inspect boundary lines between neighboring estates. On other occasions, he discussed improvements to tenant farms or reviewed accounts with Duke Edmund. Every visit appeared entirely proper, yet each one carried the same quiet purpose. He hoped to spend a few moments with Lady Beatrice. The Duchess noticed the pattern long before anyone else. Each time Nathaniel's carriage appeared before the manor, Lavinia devised another reason to keep her daughter out of sight. One afternoon Beatrice was instructed to remain in the library cataloging old family records. Another day she was sent to supervise linen inventories with the housekeeper. Whenever Nathaniel politely asked whether Lady Beatrice might join them for tea, the Duchess answered with flawless composure. "My daughter has occupied herself with household matters today." Nathaniel thanked her courteously, though he had begun to recognize that every explanation served the same purpose. Only Duke Edmund seemed unaware of what unfolded beneath his own roof. He welcomed Nathaniel's frequent visits as evidence of growing friendship between two influential families and never questioned why his daughter was almost always absent. Fortune finally favored Nathaniel during one bright spring morning. As he crossed the South Gardens after concluding business with the Duke, he found Beatrice kneeling beside rows of newly planted lavender. Her gloves were stained with earth as she carefully replanted a young rose bush that recent winds had loosened. She looked up in surprise, then smiled with genuine warmth rather than polite obligation. "My lord, I did not expect to find you among gardeners. I might say the same of a duke's daughter." She laughed softly. "I much prefer flowers to drawing rooms. Flowers never compare themselves with one another." Nathaniel smiled at the unexpected wisdom. Together, they walked slowly through the winding paths of the estate gardens. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, touching upon books they admired, composers they loved, and improvements that might ease the burdens carried by tenant families. Nathaniel found himself astonished by the breadth of her knowledge. She understood crop rotation, estate finances, village education, and charitable work with equal confidence, yet spoke without pride or self-importance. "You know your father's estates remarkably well," he observed. Beatrice looked toward the distant fields. "I simply listen when people speak. Farmers usually know what they need better than noblemen do." The simplicity of her answer lingered in Nathaniel's thoughts. A few days later, he encountered proof of her words. While riding through the nearby village, he noticed a gathering outside the parish hall. Curious, he dismounted and watched unnoticed from a respectful distance. Beatrice stood among villagers distributing blankets, reading letters aloud for elderly widows, and arranging medicine for a sick child whose parents could not afford treatment. She remembered every person's name. She asked after their families before discussing their troubles. No servant announced her arrival, and no one bowed because they were required to. Instead, they welcomed her with affection that could never be commanded. An old carpenter clasped her hands. "God bless you, my lady. Without your help, my granddaughter would never have learned to read." Beatrice answered with quiet embarrassment. "The credit belongs to her teacher. I merely purchased a few books." Nathaniel realized she dismissed every kindness she performed as though it were insignificant. That evening he returned home, carrying thoughts heavier than any ledger or estate report. Society had judged Lady Beatrice solely by her appearance, while ignoring the remarkable strength of her character. He had met women celebrated for beauty in every fashionable drawing room of London, yet none possessed the grace he had witnessed in a humble village street. His admiration quietly deepened into something far more dangerous. Meanwhile, rumors spread through London's aristocratic circles. Noble ladies whispered that Lord Nathaniel Hawthorne had become an unusually frequent visitor at Ashcombe Hall. Mothers confidently assumed he intended to court one of the celebrated beauties often invited by Duchess Lavinia. Among those expectations stood Lady Celeste Fairmont, whose beauty dominated every social gathering. She accepted compliments with effortless confidence and privately believed Nathaniel's repeated visits could have only one purpose. The Duchess encouraged the misunderstanding. She seated Celeste beside Nathaniel at dinners, praised her elegance within his hearing, and arranged opportunities for them to converse. Yet Nathaniel remained politely distant. His attention wandered whenever Beatrice's name was absent from conversation. At last he addressed the matter directly. "I have visited Ashcombe Hall many times," he said calmly during luncheon. "Yet Lady Beatrice always seems occupied elsewhere. I hope I have not unknowingly given offense." An uneasy silence settled across the table. Before Duke Edmund could answer, Lavinia smiled. "My daughter has never cared for society. She prefers solitude." Nathaniel glanced toward the staircase. "That surprises me. She never appeared uncomfortable when we spoke." For the first time, the Duchess's smile faltered. Later that afternoon, Lavinia confronted Beatrice in her chambers. "You will remain here tomorrow," she ordered coldly. "Lord Hawthorne's attention has already encouraged enough foolish gossip." Beatrice lowered her eyes. "I have done nothing improper." "No," the Duchess replied sharply, "but your very presence invites embarrassment." When Nathaniel arrived the following day, he noticed every curtain in the upper floor remained closed. He accepted the Duke's hospitality, completed their business, and prepared to leave. As his carriage rolled slowly away from Ashcombe Hall, he looked once toward the silent windows above. He no longer believed Lady Beatrice preferred solitude. He had begun to suspect she was living behind a door someone else insisted remained locked. And he quietly resolved that he would discover the truth, whatever discomfort it caused the proud Duchess of Ashcombe. The annual Midsummer Assembly at Kensington House drew the highest ranks of English society from every corner of the kingdom. Crystal chandeliers illuminated soaring ceilings painted with scenes of ancient triumphs, while an orchestra filled the magnificent ballroom with graceful waltzes. Ladies arrived wearing gowns embroidered with silver thread and glittering gemstones, each hoping to become the evening's most admired beauty. Gentlemen discussed politics, estates, and fortunes, yet nearly every conversation eventually returned to one subject: Lord Nathaniel Hawthorne. Rumors of his frequent visits to Ashcombe Hall had spread throughout London, but most guests remained convinced he would soon declare his intentions toward Lady Celeste Fairmont. She entered the ballroom surrounded by admirers, her confidence shining as brightly as the diamonds around her neck. Duchess Lavinia herself welcomed Celeste with unusual warmth, believing the match would erase every unpleasant whisper surrounding her own family. Only one person seemed absent from the celebration: Lady Beatrice. As servants prepared the Ashcombe carriage earlier that afternoon, Lavinia had once again instructed her daughter to remain at home. "There is no reason for you to endure unnecessary attention," she said coolly. "Society has enough distractions this evening." Beatrice quietly accepted the command without protest. Years of disappointment had taught her that arguing only deepened her mother's contempt. Yet Duke Edmund, who had listened in uneasy silence, spoke before the carriage departed. "My daughter will attend." The room became still. Lavinia turned toward her husband in disbelief. "She will only invite ridicule." Edmund looked at Beatrice rather than his wife. "She is a daughter of this house. She has every right to stand beside her family." It was the first time in years he had openly contradicted the Duchess. An hour later, Beatrice entered the ballroom wearing a gown of deep sapphire blue. It lacked the extravagant decorations favored by fashionable society, but its elegance suited her gentle nature. She wore no expression of expectation, only quiet dignity. Conversations softened as guests noticed her arrival. Some ladies exchanged concealed smiles. Others whispered behind jeweled fans. A few gentlemen glanced briefly before returning their attention elsewhere. Beatrice had grown accustomed to such moments. She neither hurried nor lowered her eyes. Instead, she greeted acquaintances politely and remained beside her father. Across the ballroom, Nathaniel entered. Within moments, every ambitious mother straightened eagerly. Several beautiful young women subtly positioned themselves along his path, expecting him to offer the first dance. Lady Celeste smiled with complete confidence as he approached. Instead, Nathaniel walked directly past every celebrated beauty without hesitation. The ballroom gradually fell silent. He stopped before Beatrice. With perfect courtesy, he bowed. "Lady Beatrice," he said warmly, "would you honor me with this dance?" For an instant she wondered whether he had mistaken her for someone else. "Aye, my lord, surely there are ladies far more deserving." "There are many beautiful ladies present," Nathaniel replied gently, "but only one whose company I have hoped to find all evening." The orchestra began another waltz. Beatrice placed her trembling hand in his. As they moved across the polished floor, astonished eyes followed every graceful step. Nathaniel danced without the slightest trace of embarrassment or hesitation. His attention never wandered toward the whispers surrounding them. "You should not concern yourself with what they think," he said quietly. "I have spent most of my life trying not to." "I know." She looked at him in surprise. "I have seen how others overlook you. They mistake appearance for worth. It is a costly mistake." Emotion threatened to overwhelm her. "No one has ever spoken to me that way." "Then they have failed to see what has been before them." At the edge of the ballroom, Duchess Lavinia's composure finally cracked. She crossed the room before the music had ended, her face rigid with barely controlled anger. When the dance concluded, she intercepted Nathaniel before anyone else could approach. "My lord," she said through a practiced smile, "perhaps Lady Celeste has been waiting for your attention." Nathaniel answered calmly, "I have already found the lady with whom I wish to spend this evening." The meaning could no longer be misunderstood. Gasps rippled through the gathering. Lady Celeste turned pale before quietly leaving the ballroom, unable to endure the humiliation. Lavinia's voice dropped to a sharp whisper. "You are encouraging impossible gossip." "I am encouraging honesty. My daughter is entirely unsuited to your position." Nathaniel met her gaze steadily. "Your Grace, I believe your daughter possesses qualities that no title or fortune can purchase. You know nothing about her. I know she treats servants with respect. I know villagers speak her name with gratitude. I know she carries herself with kindness despite years of needless cruelty." The final words struck like a slap. Standing only a few steps away, Duke Edmund had heard every sentence. His expression slowly changed from confusion to painful realization. He thought of every dinner where Beatrice had been criticized, every invitation quietly withdrawn, every excuse explaining her absence, and every moment he had remained silent to preserve peace within his household. That silence now felt like cowardice. He approached his wife. "Lavinia," he said firmly, "have you truly spent all these years convincing our own daughter she was something to be hidden?" The Duchess searched for an answer, but found none that sounded noble. Around them, conversations ceased entirely. For the first time since their marriage, she stood alone. Nathaniel turned toward Beatrice, whose eyes shimmered with restrained tears. The ballroom, the gossip, and the judgment of society no longer mattered to him. With unwavering certainty, he took one respectful step closer. Then, before England's highest nobility, he prepared to ask the question that would forever change the destiny of the House of Ashcombe.